Imagine barricading the only exit to a crowded shopping mall, right? You want to extort the shoppers, keep them trapped.
Yeah, a classic hostage situation.
Exactly. But then, while you're doing that, the police surround the entire neighborhood, and suddenly you realize you're the one who can't get out.
You've locked yourself inside your own trap.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at the geopolitical equivalent of that exact scenario playing out on the global stage.
It's a wild situation.
It really is. So for you listening, our mission today is to unpack a highly detailed, translated audio interview from Radio Irava.
Right, from May 10th, 2026.
Yeah, May 10th. And the guest is Mr. Aziz Paknejad. We're breaking down this whole geopolitical and economic standoff at the Strait of Hormuz between the U.S. and the Iranian regime.
And before we get into the weeds here, because this source contains politically charged claims and viewpoints,
Yeah.
we need to make it 100% clear that we are not taking any sides, nor are we endorsing any of the political statements made in this material. Our job today is solely to impartially report and analyze the ideas contained in the original source material for your understanding.
Yeah, we are just looking at the source. And for you listening, understanding this standoff is kind of the skeleton key to making sense of the chaos in the global energy markets right now.
Oh, totally.
It's the ultimate irony, really, how a regime's attempt to hold global commerce hostage accidentally triggered a trap that, well, it might just collapse their own economy.
Yeah, the miscalculation is massive. But to really grasp how the politics and the money work here, we have to start with the physical chessboard.
The geography, right?
Exactly. The geography of the Strait of Hormuz dictates literally everything. The space we are talking about is the ultimate geographic choke point,
It's basically a bottleneck.
a massive bottleneck. It connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman. We're talking an area between 8,000 and 12,000 square kilometers.
Which is a huge variance.
It is, yeah. It stretches about 158 to 167 kilometers long.
Yeah.
But the vulnerability, the real issue, lies in the width. If you draw a line from Bandar Abbas on the Iranian side down to the Musandam Peninsula in Oman, the gap narrows down to just 56 to 87 kilometers.
Which doesn't sound too crazy until you think about what's actually moving through there.
Exactly.
Now, for you listening, you might think, water is water. But when you are navigating these massive 300-meter-long oil tankers, the depth becomes a matter of life and death.
Oh, yeah, the depth is critical.
The seafloor actually slopes, so near Oman, it's about 100 meters deep. But as you move north into the Persian Gulf, it gets shallower.
Much shallower.
Yeah, it averages around 90 meters, and 90 meters of depth is a total nightmare when you are dealing with the threat of naval mines.
Right, because shallower waters severely limit how much a massive cargo ship can maneuver.
If it just can't turn.
Exactly. It makes asymmetric warfare tactics, using cheap, unconventional weapons like naval mines or fast-attack speedboats, just devastatingly effective.
Even against a multi-million-dollar vessel.
Especially against those. And before this standoff, the sheer volume of global trade relying on this shallow corridor was just staggering.
Yeah, give us the numbers on that.
We're talking 1/5 of the world's global oil production, plus 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas flowed right through this gap,
That's insane.
along with massive agricultural and mineral exports, too.
And to put that in perspective for you listening, when that flow is threatened, that is the exact moment your energy bills and inflation at home start to skyrocket.
Right, the ripple effect is immediate.
Whoever controls this stretch of water basically has their hand on the valve of the entire global economy.
Which turns the territorial claims in this area into an absolute legal nightmare.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, so Iran controls the northern coastline. But more importantly, they have sovereignty over a string of islands there.
Which ones?
Hormuz, Qeshm, Larak, and Hengam, plus Abu Musa and the Greater and Lesser Tums.
Right, and these aren't just like tourist beaches.
No, not at all. They aren't just patches of sand. They function like unsinkable aircraft carriers
Wow.
because they jet directly into the shipping lanes. So they serve as perfect, fortified hiding spots for anti-ship missile batteries and drone launch sites.
And then on the other side, Oman controls the main southern coastline.
Correct.
And you even have the UAE and Saudi Arabia pouring millions of tons of rock and sand into the sea to build artificial islands.
Yeah, desperately trying to extend their territorial footprint.
Right. But sealing off a body of water isn't just about barking ships there,
Yeah.
There is a whole framework of international maritime law to consider.
Yeah, the legal side is super complicated. Under that law, Both Iran and Oman claim a 12 nautical mile territorial water zone from their coastlines,
Okay.
plus a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. But because the strait is so narrow, those 12-mile zones don't actually touch.
Right, there's a gap.
Exactly. They leave a designated channel right down the middle. And that middle channel consists of shared international waters.
So nobody owns it.
Legally, it must remain free for the passage of global commerce.
But according to the interview, the regime just completely threw that rulebook out the window.
Totally ignored it.
They didn't just restrict their own sovereign waters, they closed the entire strait, hijacking the international shipping lanes using the threat of drones and missiles.
Yeah, an unprecedented move.
And they literally demanded a $2 million toll per ship just for safe passage.
Just massive extortion.
Yeah, it was a blatant move to extort the global market.
The U.S. counter-move, though, completely shifted the paradigm. Instead of fighting inside that narrow, dangerous choke point, the U.S. moved out into the open ocean.
It pulled back.
Right. They established a massive naval blockade further south in the Gulf of Oman, drawing a hard line from the Iranian port of Chabahar all the way across to the UAE.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the U.S. didn't actually need to fire a barrage of missiles to stop the boats.
No, they did.
They targeted the paperwork. They went after the maritime insurance companies.
A brilliant administrative move.
Right. The U.S. warned all global shipping companies that any ship paying the Iranian toll would be stopped and heavily fined.
Yeah.
And by threatening those fines, they terrified the maritime insurance companies. It's like cutting the internet cable to a modern office building.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
The physical building is totally fine. The desks are there, but absolutely no work can get done.
Exactly. The insurance market just froze overnight.
No one wants to underwrite that risk.
Right. Without coverage, hundreds of ships, we're talking massive tankers, cargo vessels, even recreational boats, they simply dropped anchor outside the strait and refused to move.
They just sat there.
Yeah. The regime tried to use the strait as a strategic trump card. But the U.S. blockade neutralized it by sealing off the wider perimeter.
The hostage taker found themselves locked in the bank.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
So with both sides locked in this massive naval stalemate, the source dives into how these superpowers attempt to maneuver without, triggering World War III.
Which is a very real risk here.
Very real. And this brings us to Operation Liberty, or Projet Azadi in Persian.
What was the goal there?
This was a planned U.S. naval mission scheduled for a Tuesday. The goal was to heavily arm and militarily escort commercial ships straight through the regime's blockade.
Okay, but the U.S. president at the time of this 2026 interview, Donald Trump, he abruptly halted the entire operation, right?
He did. The decision came after intense consultations with Pakistan.
Pakistan.
Yeah, they were acting as a diplomatic mediator, along with some Arab allies. And the consensus they reached was stark.
What was it?
Sending U.S. naval destroyers to babysit slow, highly vulnerable commercial tankers, it would essentially serve up American targets on a silver platter for the regime's drones and missiles.
Wait, I have to stop you there. The U.S. has the most powerful Navy in human history.
Without a doubt.
You're telling me they paused an entire operation because they were afraid of some cheap drones? Why not just sweep the strait and call their bluff?
Because taking a hit forces a reaction.
Yeah.
The moment an American ship suffers casualties, the U.S. is politically and militarily obligated to respond with overwhelming force.
Which escalates things.
Instantly.
Yeah.
It escalates into a massive trillion-dollar hot war. The U.S. realized their Gulf of Oman blockade was already suffocating the regime without costing American lives.
Oh, so they didn't need to shoot.
Right. Pausing Operation Liberty was a strategic calculation to avoid giving the regime the exact kind of conflict they desperately wanted.
And the market reaction was immediate, too. The source notes that the price of Brent crude oil dropped 7.1%, down to $108 a barrel the second the pause was announced.
The panic subsided.
Yeah, the immediate threat of a hot war evaporated, so the panic pricing cooled off. But the psychological warfare just ramped up.
Oh, big time. The regime's foreign ministry, specifically Abbas Araghchi, claimed the planned U.S. operation would have severely damaged diplomatic channels.
Interesting spin.
Yeah, and meanwhile, domestic media inside Iran spun the U.S. pause as a cowardly retreat. They declared it a sweeping, historic victory for the regime.
a victory lap that was happening while things were literally blowing up.
Literally.
Because at that same time, there was a major drone and missile attack on the port of Fujairah in the UAE, which sparked a massive fire.
Which perfectly illustrates the regime's operational playbook.
How so?
Well, they officially and vehemently denied any involvement in the Fujairah attack.
Right.
Yet, in the very same press conference, their foreign ministry spokesperson issued a severe warning to the UAE, telling them not to collaborate with the U.S. and Israel.
It's plausible deniability packaged with overt intimidation, like we didn't burn your house down, but let this be a lesson to you.
Exactly. And they were also testing the physical limits of the U.S. blockade.
Did they push through?
The source details how the regime sent ships to forcefully breach the U.S. line in the Gulf of Oman on 2 separate occasions.
What did the U.S. do?
They responded without hesitation. They fired missiles and captured both vessels.
Wow.
Although a third Iranian ship reportedly managed to slip through the blockade using high-speed evasion tactics. But the primary wall held firm.
Which proves the U.S. wasn't backing down at all. They were just holding a more advantageous line.
Yep, playing the long game.
In fact, the U.S. originally set a 2-week deadline for a ceasefire. But once they saw how devastatingly effective their insurance and naval blockade was, they lifted that deadline completely.
They made it indefinite.
Yeah, they made the blockade indefinite. They're completely content to sit back and economically drain the regime.
What's fascinating here is, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the global fallout.
Right.
If a fifth of the world's oil is blocked, why hasn't the global economy totally collapsed? Why aren't we seeing $20 gallons of gas?
That is the million-dollar question.
Well, the surrounding Arab states spent years planning for this exact doomsday scenario. They built massive backdoors.
The pipelines.
Yes, the pipelines. Saudi Arabia constructed an absolute engineering marvel. It's a 1,200-kilometer pipeline stretching entirely across their landmass from east to west.
Going where?
Terminating at the Red Sea. So it completely bypasses the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman. And it moves a staggering 7 million barrels of oil every single day overland.
That is an unbelievable infrastructure flex.
It's massive.
The region basically replumbed its entire oil network.
And the UAE followed suit. They built a 350-kilometer pipeline that pumps oil directly to the Gulf of Oman, entirely bypassing the Chokepoint.
Smart.
And Iraq uses vast pipeline networks to push their oil north and west through Turkey, Jordan, and Oman.
So the oil still flows?
Exactly. If the sea route dies, the product still reaches the global market.
But did Iran build a backdoor?
Well, they initiated a project. It was called the Ghor-to-Jask pipeline.
Okay, what was the plan there?
The plan was to move 1 million barrels a day overland to the Gulf of Oman, which would circumvent the very strait they keep threatening to close.
Oh, the irony.
Yeah, but the execution was a masterclass in political dysfunction and theater.
Yeah, Mr. Paknejad was practically laughing about this in the interview.
Yeah, he really was.
He pointed out that presidents spanning totally different eras, from Khatami to Ahmadinejad to Rouhani, they all did the exact same thing with this project.
Right. They hosted these grand televised ceremonies to inaugurate various unfinished sections of the pipeline.
Just cutting ribbons on empty pipes.
Literally cutting a ribbon on a dry, empty pipe, just to give the Iranian public the illusion of economic progress and strategic invulnerability.
So it doesn't work.
Despite decades of promises, budgets, and photo ops, the pipeline was never completed. You cannot move the oil.
The tragic irony here is staggering. Iran triggers a blockade on the world's most vital maritime route, thinking they're going to hold the entire globe hostage.
Right.
But all their neighbors have back doors. Iran is the only one without a working pipeline out. They literally barricaded the door and trapped themselves.
And the economic reality of that self-inflicted isolation is brutal.
It has to be.
Because they lack that pipeline infrastructure to bypass the U.S. blockade, the regime's funds aren't going to slowly dwindle over the next few years.
How fast are we talking?
The source estimates their financial reserves will dry up in a matter of weeks, maybe a month. The blockade is accelerating an inevitable and rapid economic collapse.
Okay, but if the regime is backed into this brutal economic corner and their blockade strategy is completely failing to hold the world hostage,
Yeah.
why on earth did they keep provoking their adversaries? Why not just sue for peace, open the strait, and get their economy moving again?
Because for this specific regime, peace is an existential threat.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Walk me through that. How is provoking a military superpower safer than establishing peace?
The source outlines a core psychological analysis of dictatorial survival. The regime thrives in a permanent state of no war, no peace.
So they need the tension.
It is the classic rally around the flag effect. As long as there is an external foreign enemy to blame, the regime can justify martial law, extreme domestic oppression, and economic hardship.
Ah, I see.
If an absolute secure peace were to break out, that external scapegoat vanishes entirely.
And the Iranian people would immediately look inward.
Exactly. They would look at their hollowed-out economy and demand basic stability. Food, jobs, modern living standards.
Things the regime can't provide.
Right. Because the regime has squandered its wealth and failed to build actual infrastructure, like those empty pipelines we discussed, they cannot meet those basic demands.
So peace means an uprising.
The immediate, guaranteed result of peace would be an internal revolution.
The interview actually references two specific recent conflicts to prove how far the regime will go to survive. They refer to them as the 12-Day War and the 40-Day War.
Yeah, and during the 12-Day War, the regime's grip was incredibly vulnerable.
Very shaky.
The source reveals a fascinating historical detail here. The supreme leader, Khamenei, was actually offered the chance to flee into exile.
Wait, really?
Yes. The international community effectively offered him a golden parachute, advising him to step down and leave the country. Much like the Shah of Iran did decades prior, or like Assad was advised to do in Syria.
But he refused the off-ramp. He chose to stay and ensure survival through sheer brutality.
He did. The regime violently crushed the domestic protests that erupted. They deliberately displayed the bodies of the martyrs in the streets.
That is incredibly grim.
It is. The supreme leader explicitly stated they had crushed the sedition. Leaving bodies in the streets is a calculated psychological tool.
A message to the world.
Exactly. It sent a chilling, undeniable message to the international community. Do not count on the Iranian people rising up to solve your geopolitical problems, because we will slaughter them all if they try.
And that grim reality bled right into the 40-Day War, which essentially exhausted everyone.
Everyone was drained.
The U.S. and Israel on one side, the regime on the other. It led to the current, incredibly fragile ceasefire. But it leaves a glaring question.
What's that?
If the regime is so weak domestically that they have to display bodies to maintain control, why doesn't the U.S. just finish it? Why avoid a full regime change war?
Well, the fear in Washington is the aftermath.
The power vacuum.
Precisely. The U.S. lacks a viable, allied alternative ready to step in and govern Iran. Tearing down the regime creates a massive power vacuum, likely leading to a chaotic civil war.
Nobody wants that.
No. Furthermore, a long, drawn-out nation-building exercise in the Middle East would completely distract the U.S. from its primary global competitor, China.
Right, the pivot to Asia.
Containment is cheaper, it's more predictable, and it doesn't require U.S. troops on the ground.
But the rhetoric coming from the U.S. president at the time did not sound like containment.
No, it didn't.
Trump publicly stated that the Iranian people need weapons to overthrow the regime. That isn't containment. That sounds like a direct public call to arm an insurgency.
And the diplomatic whiplash from that statement was severe.
I can imagine.
Immediate rumors circulated that weapons were being secretly shipped to Kurdish opposition groups inside Iran.
Did they get them?
Interestingly, those Kurdish groups came out and categorically denied it. They stated they never received a single bullet. Rumors persist that if weapons were sent, they were intercepted or diverted by corrupt actors. But the larger issue was the legal nightmare the president's words created.
Because you can't just openly announce you are arming a rebellion without violating a massive web of international and anti-terrorism laws.
Exactly.
Which is exactly why the Secretary of State had to step in and do massive damage control.
Yeah. Secretary of State Rubio had to publicly walk back the president's statement, softening the rhetoric entirely.
How did he spin it?
He reframed the president's words, explaining it wasn't a live military operation, but rather a hypothetical lament.
A hypothetical lament.
Right. He suggested the president was simply expressing sorrow for the unarmed protesters who were shot by regime snipers back during the 2009 uprisings.
Oh, wow.
Saying it was a tragedy they didn't have the means to defend themselves back then.
It is an absolute masterclass in diplomatic tap dancing.
It really is. And this raises an important question, right? Look at the absolute misalignment of goals here.
What do you mean?
Well, you have the U.S., whose overarching geopolitical objective is simply to contain the regime, avoid a messy power vacuum, and pivot their focus to China.
Right.
Then you have the Iranian people, whose goal is to overthrow the very regime that is starving and oppressing them.
Two totally different endgames.
Exactly. The U.S. and the Iranian people share an adversary, but their end goals are entirely contradictory. The U.S. wants a quiet, contained Iran. The people want a free Iran.
So what does this all mean? When we look back at everything we've covered today, it is incredible how connected it all is.
It's a massive web.
Yeah, we started with the physical depth of the water in the Strait of Hormuz, which dictates the threat of naval mines.
Which triggers the U.S. blockade.
Exactly, a blockade that targets maritime insurance rather than firing missiles. And that blockade exposes the empty, unfinished pipelines in Iran.
Trapping the regime.
Trapping a regime that realizes fighting the U.S. is actually safer than facing its own starving citizens in peacetime. Understanding these invisible layers of global trade, geography, and pure psychological desperation, it makes the chaotic daily news make so much more sense.
It really does. But as we look at how the surrounding Arab nations brilliantly bypass the Strait of Hormuz with their massive cross-country pipeline networks, it forces us to reevaluate what security really means in this modern era.
Oh, so...
Well, if the entire Middle East is avoiding the world's most critical maritime choke point by building thousands of kilometers of overland pipes, doesn't that just shift the vulnerability?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Are we simply moving from an era where a naval blockade paralyzed the world to an era where a single cheap drone flown into the deep desert could sever a 1,200-kilometer pipeline?
Wow, yeah.
Have we truly bypassed the danger? Or have we just turned the vast desert landmass into the exact same hostage situation as the Strait of Hormuz?
That is a terrifying but necessary thought to end on. You really have to look past the surface-level narratives when it comes to global events. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning what you read, keep looking for the deeper connections, and we'll see you on the next one.